Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Rams Up, your LA Rams podcast. And last week we did a pre-draft roundtable with Paul and Tom. We have them back this week to do a recap from a Rams perspective. How you doing, Paul? You're out in Long Island still, I assume?
Out here in beautiful Long Island, relaxing, celebrating after the draft, and very excited to see you both again. My favorite Rampages out west. The Lombardi Trophy has made its way out east. I have it here. I'm taking great care of it. I'll see you back when I'm done. You and Tom can share it.
And how are you doing, Tom?
Hey, great. Just up here in Raider and 49er territory in Northern California, and so a couple of teams that are extremely excited about their prospects, not only with the draft but going into the season, and so a lot of football excitement in the air.
Yes, and so everyone knows, if you're listening to this on our typical podcast on your favorite podcast platform, you can also find this segment of the podcast on our new YouTube channel, trying to build up some presence there. So go to YouTube and search for LA Rams Up, and we'll pop up there for you. We don't have a custom URL yet. We need subscribers to make that happen. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the podcast, please. We really appreciate it. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about this We're going to talk about this Rams draft, and these are the picks. We'll go through them real quick. Well, you can see them on your screen there. You got the guard out of Wisconsin, our third Wisconsin offensive lineman now, the cornerback out of South Carolina State, a running back, a safety, and then two more DBs, a cornerback and a defensive back, and in between them, a defensive end, and A.J. Arcuri. Hey, one question for you guys. How do you see, how would you characterize Daniel Hardy? Is he strictly an edge guy? I've seen him listed as an outside linebacker, a defensive end, an edge. I guess it just depends on the scheme. How would you characterize Daniel Hardy?
Yeah, I think he's mostly an edge. I think that's how they drafted him, and I haven't really heard anything other than that.
And any comments on the nature of these picks? Let me pull up a position by position look at what the Rams did here. That gives our listeners some perspective. So between the draft and the trade for Troy Hill, they added 5 DBs. They added the one interior offensive lineman and Arcuri, which I characterize as a swing tackle. I think they drafted him for his versatility. And the one edge guy, Hardy, one running back. Does any of this surprise you as far as the positions they picked?
Yeah, I was sort of surprised that they didn't go O-line a little earlier in the draft, and I was surprised that they only wound up with one late edge rusher. But, edge is also a very popular position, so those guys were flying off the boards as well. But
yeah, I think on our pre-draft roundtable, we all nailed it pretty well between the three of us as what they would be focusing on. Maybe not the order, but the positions that they would focus on.
Yeah, there was clearly a heavy focus on the defensive backs, right, between the cornerbacks and the safeties, and then O-line with that guard and the tackle. They're always going to pick a running back. I think your special assistant made that suggestion, and they listened. And then the edge, and Daniel Hardy's a little bit of a project there, but So then maybe we can discuss after we go through these what kind of what message this sends to the in terms of what free agents and whatnot that they might still be looking at.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Let's go through these picks one at a time, shall we?
Sounds good.
Oh, real quickly, I'll mention the trades so that our listeners are totally aware of what went on. It can be very confusing. Those are the trades there. They traded the 6th rounder, 218th overall, to the Bucks for the 2 7th rounders, and then they traded the 175 overall and got 2 trades back from the. I'm sorry, I messed that up. A trade with the Bucks and a trade with the Raiders. Basically, ended up with 8 picks, the same 8 picks that they started with, the same number of picks, just moving around a little bit, and then they traded next year's 5th for Troy Hill. Get that out of the way here. That's the boring trade stuff. Try to keep track of that during the draft will drive you crazy. And so the first pick was this 3rd round, number 104, Logan Bruss, the guard out of Wisconsin. 6.6 grade on NFL.com, 3-year starter. And from what I heard, the Rams really look at Wisconsin offensive linemen because their scheme is so similar to the Rams. It makes it very easy for them to assess how they're going to fit into their scheme. This guy was not on my radar, but makes sense. We should have thought about that. They've already drafted fairly recently 2 Wisconsin offensive linemen, and now they had a 3rd Badger. How do you feel about this draft pick, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I love the draft pick. The fact that they know they have to hit on this pick, right? They know that it's really important that they hit on this pick because of the need, probably among, especially after the Troy Hill trade. This is their biggest need, is that guard position, that right guard position. So they had to have a lot of confidence in it. They have a lot of information about him. They have a lot of confidence in the Wisconsin program, obviously know it well with Havenstein and Edwards having been there, and just a stand-up guy, a redshirt senior, lots of experience, and just somebody they can really, really trust to jump in there and plug that huge hole they have at that right guard position.
And Paul, how about you? You like this pick?
Yeah, I love this pick. Logan Bruss fits perfectly, like you said, what they want to do in that zone. His toughness, his leadership, overall, I think he's much more mobile than people give him credit for. There was another prospect, Cordell Volson from South Dakota State. I think those two were like almost identical type prospects, but great pick. 1 sack allowed over 596 snaps. Really speaks to his consistency, multi-year starter. Everything the Rams usually look for when they look at prospects, he checked all the boxes, like we said.
A couple of other notes on Logan Bruss. He really smart guy, graduated with a degree in industrial engineering, not like physical fitness or something that a lot of these guys do. He had 0 holding penalties in his entire college career. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and and the other thing is that, as most people know, he played right tackle his entire senior year, and so while he fits better as a guard, he does have that versatility at tackle in case there's an injury there, and he could shoot out, and we could put somebody else in at guard, a Coleman Shelton or something like that.
Yeah, and we all heard the story about Brian Hill jumping into the pool when they made this pick, and he's the lead scout that also pushed the Rams to draft Jordan Fuller and Cooper Kupp. So he's got an excellent track record, that's for sure.
Yeah, a little bit of toughness there too. Apparently, he broke his foot in the first half of the championship game in high school, and strapped it up and played through it, and helped his team win the championship. So always got to love the guys that'll play through the injuries and love the game.
So we're thinking our right guard will be Coleman Shelton or very possibly Logan Bruss at this point.
I think it was a smart move to draft him, to increase the competition in that position, right? It increases the odds of getting your best option to get into the starting lineup. So Logan Bruss, Shelton, and maybe another veteran or whoever else that they bring in, I think, or maybe a UDFA even, because there were a lot of players that were undrafted that are quality players that are still out there. So yeah. I think that's the idea, right? You have as much competition as humanly possible for that position and choose the person. And you still got Bobby Evans too in the mix.
Right.
But what really stood out for me with Logan Bruss on the tape, when you watch the tape, is for a person that they're saying is not really mobile and nimble. When he went to the second level, he was looking for someone to hit, and he was able to. And that's not an easy thing to do in space. as a lineman. You can ask any lineman. He was able to find people and he was able to put them through the ground. He was really, really good at that. And you watch all his games, it was a very consistent attribute. And I think that is the one thing that stood out for me with him, that he can get to the second level. He can find those bodies that he needs to attack. And when he's able to square them up and finish them off. So that's something that we can look forward to if he gets to the starting lineup.
Yeah, there were a lot of cornerbacks still on the board that I liked, but
Yeah.
I can't argue with interior offensive line at this point. So I think we're all happy with that pick. I think he's going to be a really positive addition. I feel much better about our offensive line at this point. There still is one concern I'll get to later on with regards to the offensive line, but solid pick by the Rams, I think. Next up was in the fourth round, number 142, Kobie Durant, cornerback out of South Carolina State. This is a guy that had 2 interceptions against Clemson. 12 career interceptions, very fast, good ball skills. Another guy that I really hadn't considered at this spot. There were a lot of other higher profile cornerbacks on the board, but the Rams clearly love this guy. The MEAC Defensive Player of the Year, by the way. How'd you feel about that pick, Tom?
Yeah, a couple of things stand out. Obviously, his size and is the biggest concern, and that's why he wasn't rated as high as some of those other cornerbacks. But another guy who, as we had mentioned, I think before, the Rams love guys that played quarterback, and he was a quarterback in high school. But what's interesting about this guy, he didn't have any scholarship offers. He was a 0-star recruit out of high school, and he also didn't qualify academically, so he couldn't go anywhere. So a little bit of a red flag there, and something that's a little maybe unusual for the Rams. He played in the East-West Shrine Bowl, which is where he stood out, along with, as did Bruss, by the way, and a few of these other guys. So they like their all-star game guys. He's really athletic. He can play the man or the zone. As you mentioned, a couple of interceptions against Clemson. He also gave up a touchdown in that game, however. But he's undersized, could get out physical, but they like him as as in the man, primarily in the zone coverage, as a sort of a nickelback.
I'm sure you have an opinion on this guy, Paul. How do you feel about Kobie Durant joining the Rams here?
Well, first thing, shout out to HBCU. We did the mock. I had one from HBCU, so Rams were thinking.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. So, it's interesting. When you watch his tape, there's one word, active. Kid's all over the place. And if you watch the presser after the draft, there was a couple of things that McVay said over and over and over again. He talked about interceptions. And when we did our podcast, if you remember a month or so ago, that was what we said. We said the secondary has to produce more of those turnovers, those interceptions. And I think if you look at the Rams draft, when they looked at these corners, all their cornerbacks have the tendency to turn the ball over, right? They can get those INTs. And that was like the constant theme I noticed in all these picks. So I think that was one of the reasons that he sort of stood out. Because I agree with you. Tariq Woolen was still on the board. Zion McCollum was still on the board when they picked Kobie, which I thought was really interesting. Me personally, I definitely would have taken Tariq Woolen. But I think they put production over potential in this one. And Kobie did have a great deal of production. His tackling needs to get cleaned up, but it's not that he's shy about tackling. He throws his body around. It's just the technique. Everything there was very, very positive. But it also speaks to, if you look at his size, maybe they are sort of, putting him in that slot spot, right, to cover the slot.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Where you guys see him lining up.
So great pick. I mean, in terms of ability-wise, he definitely looks like a player. Definitely has a knack for that big play. And, like I said, he's active. His tape, he's active. He's everywhere. He's all over the field.
Yeah, and Tom, you and I have talked several times about this. There is going to be multiple cornerbacks taken in this draft by the Rams. It just had to play out that way. So this wasn't a surprise position-wise to me.
Right.
Next up.
And we got our Kobie also, right? We didn't get Kobie Bryant, but we got Kobie Durant instead. So we got our Kobie.
It's got a basketball flavor to his name for sure, first and last.
Right.
So in the fifth round, number 165 overall, this is they traded up to grab this pick from the Bucks, or was it the Raiders? Was this the trade with the Bucks or the Raiders? I don't recall, but regardless, they move up to 165 and draft Kyren Williams, a running back out of Notre Dame. Now, another guy I wasn't real familiar with, but I started reading about him. And if you told me what did the Rams need at running back, they need a guy that can pass block. They need a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield, and they need a guy that can get yards in short yardage situations. I think that last thing, the short yardage back, was the thing they were lacking the most. And then you described Kyren Williams, and he fits it to a T from what I can see. So I really love this pick. Did you like this pick, Paul? I know was Kyren on your board at all for the Rams at this point?
Yeah, so Kyren Williams was definitely on the board. He's definitely a solid pick. This, when you go to your questions, which pick confused you the most? This is the pick that confused me the most. Not so much about him, but sort of like, what exactly were they, focusing on when they selected him? So is he someone that they're looking to replace Hendo for next year, right? Because of his all-around game, which makes a lot of sense, which is great. One thing that I did like about him as a player was that, high marks for the intangibles. He was a captain, also played well on special teams. He basically did it all. A compact build, like you have written there, runs well between the tackles. And he's also a huge Steven Jackson fan, right? So there were all these photos after he got selected of him and when he was growing up in St. Louis. He was a big Steven Jackson fan, so perfect for the Rams. The only issue I have with the pick is, we're focusing on running it back and everything else. So two things. A player that you're trying to utilize him for, which is either change of pace, out of the backfield. He's also a great pass blocker, that type of thing. Are those backs so hard to find that you have to take him now for next year? Or is
trade
that
up for him too?
Yeah, to trade up for him. So you're treating it like almost like it's an urgent pressing need, and you still don't have, and you had Sony Michel, right, who couldn't even find the field, right? You couldn't even get a snap in the Super Bowl. So it was sort of interesting because who was the leading rusher for the Rams last year? Sony Michel. Who was their best pass blocker? Sony Michel. And he couldn't get on the field. So I'm just sort of curious, like, how they're going to get him on the field. You still got Jake Funk that they said they were going to use in a very versatile way. He got hurt. So it's sort of puzzling to me. So the only way I can sort of analyze this is that they're preparing for next year, but then brings up the question, who is, your third back for this year? Is it going to be this kid? So I don't know if it necessarily, I don't know if it necessarily answered the question. He does have fumbling issues. That was like a big knock against him. But I think overall, from the intangible standpoint, it's a good fit. It's a good solid pick. I just don't know if that's the pick we should have had in the fifth round with some of the players that were on there. One of my favorite players, Kingsley Enagbari, was on there, that edge rusher that he went to Green Bay. But he was still on the board, and I think that would have been a great fit.
He really slid right from where he was originally.
Yeah, and he would have fit well with the Rams. He would have been a nice slot in. But no knock against the kid. I think he's going to be a solid fit and a great producer for the Rams.
Yeah, so when I watched the guy's film and read his profile, a comp from a different position jumped off the page at me, and it's Cooper Kupp. And the reason is that, like Kupp, Williams is, doesn't test well. He's slow, is just like Kupp was slow, right? Even came on or jumped on a recent Zoom meeting and started joking about his combine, his speed and this and that. But I think what the Rams are doing to stay ahead of the game in the draft and in the NFL in general is that they're drafting players that know how to play football. And in that, what I mean by that in more specifically is they have a very tight range intelligence and instincts. And like Kupp in his route running, which is really what sets him apart, and his yards after catch with his very sort of what looks to sometimes to be very, obvious jukes and things like that. But he's big enough to scoot out of them. That's what this guy reminds me of. He's in and around contact, in and around defenders. He's extremely instinctive and elusive. And I think they really like that. He bounces off tackles like Kupp does. And then he's, of course, a great blocker. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. He played slot in high school, natural receiver. He doesn't have that push the pile power that Sony Michel did, for example. But the reason he's good in short yardage is because he can slither through tackles and bounce off people. But he's not going to move, carry two guys that are hanging on him forward for 2 or 3 more yards. So I really like the pick. Yeah.
Speaking of athleticism, I stumbled across an article this morning. Some analyst does a study of rating each draft pick by athleticism. I won't get into the details of it. It's pretty boring, but I think it's valid. I think the approach is valid, and the Rams draft class came in last as far as athleticism.
Oh, the RAS, yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily like you say, Tom. They're not drafting for athleticism. They're drafting on other variables, I think.
Yep, it's not. This is not. It's all about their performance, their productivity. There's a theme here, and I love to. I really understand what their strategy is, their system is, when they're looking at team build, which we've talked a lot about, but also as it relates to how they're hitting on these draft picks. And while other teams tend to go for that athletic or put a premium on that athleticism and upside, the Rams put a premium on he can contribute very soon in at least an average way, and they're not necessarily trying to hit that home run.
Yeah, and that was a theme that I heard a couple of times leading up to the draft. I think I heard it from Snead and McVay about drafting players. They have a vision for every player they're drafting. They have a very specific role and vision for them, and maybe athleticism isn't a part of that as much as you would normally think. So next up, Carnell Lake's son, Quentin Lake, safety out of UCLA, 6th round, number 211 overall. And this is hitting on that theme we talked about recently, drafting guys from a football family. And Quentin Lake certainly comes from a football family. Carnell Lake, a highly regarded defensive back for the Steelers. So he comes in at 6'1", 201. Versatile safety, great instincts. So Tom, Paul, I'll let you go first on this one. How do you feel about Quentin Lake? How do you feel about this pick? I had mentioned, we had discussed last week that they have some safeties that are going to be free agents next year, but they're pretty sound at that position for this year. But so maybe this is a pick looking ahead to next year.
Yeah, you can never have too many safeties based on their scheme, right? And it makes a lot of sense. And I also love the NFL family connection. And the Rams have two, because Yeast, his dad, also played, Craig Yeast, SEC player as well. So this is a solid pick. There were some other safeties that were on the board, but for what the Rams do, he's interchangeable in terms of their safety positions. I think that's one thing they always rate very highly. He did have good production with the INTs. Once again, the same theme that they had mentioned at their presser. So I think that makes sense. So the versatility, the athleticism, and the production, I think, really stood out for them. But once again, when sort of like what you two were discussing, not going for that high profile player, but that fundamentally sound player, that player that you put them on the field. They may not stand out in any way, but they're also not getting beat in any way either. So they're producing, their solid production, they're steady, steady, I always say slow and steady wins the race. Well, these are the kind of guys. Not that he's slow, but he is very athletic. The one knock against him was that he wasn't, great in the box, wasn't overly physical, but is that how the Rams are going to utilize him? Probably not. But great player. If you watch his tape, once again, very fundamentally sound, always in the right place, coach's favorite. Also played on special teams. So there you go. That's probably where he's going to start out early on. Very similar. You know who this pick reminds me of? Nick Scott. That's who this pick reminds me of.
And Scott was taken in the 6th or 7th round, wasn't he?
Yeah.
6th
Penn
round,
State.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting. He reminds me more of Jordan Fuller, but he's but those are both good comps, right? 6 late round guys. He's interestingly there's another theme I'm seeing here is not only that he played in the East West Shrine Bowl like a couple of the other guys that they drafted previously. We always talk about Senior Bowl players, but it's really any postseason All-Star game. Redshirt senior, a lot of experience, comes from one of the top football high schools in Southern California, modern day, and produced so many great players. And the thing with him is also another similarity with some other players that defensive backs that they drafted. He was a wide receiver, right? He has that. He plays football like a wide receiver. So they do want to go after guys that are more intent on not just knocking balls down, but that are going for interceptions and playing the ball when they're targeted. So it's interesting. He is a little injury prone, and like you mentioned, could improve his tackling. But great pick in the 6th round at pick 211.
Okay, let's move on. Who do we got next? We got Darion Kendrick, another cornerback out of Georgia. And this is a 2-time national champion. He had issues at Clemson, was dismissed from the team, jumped onto the Georgia team. So he's got tons of big game experience. Now, I don't know if the incident that he was dismissed for had a little trouble with the law. I don't know how much of a red flag it is because I guess it was, I don't know if the right word is dismissed, but they never actually followed through with the charges on that. So I don't know how to characterize that. I don't have enough information, so I don't want to start guessing. But Tom, you want to take the lead on this one? How do you feel about Darion Kendrick?
Yeah, just to clarify, he was he was convicted of those, and he did a kind of a post trial work that got it expunged.
Oh, okay, that's the correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I didn't want to talk too much about it because I knew I was going to get part of it wrong.
It will, but so a couple of things about Darion Kendrick. Again, was a wide receiver drafted he was Gatorade Player of the Year in South Carolina, coming out of South Point High School, which produced guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Stephon Gilmore. I also played quarterback in high school, just one of those freak athletes that was highly, highly recruited. Went to Clemson, played wide receiver, had the issues we just talked about, transferred to Georgia, and they converted him into a cornerback, obviously won the national championship. And so one of the things is, how do guys bounce back from that kind of adversity and mistakes and things? And I saw a quote by Kirby Smart that said, "There's not a player on our team that prepares harder than he does." So he was obviously went into Georgia with a great attitude, turned things around, led the team in interceptions, and he's a little grabby. He gets a lot of pass interference calls, very physical, but a little obvious about it. So that's probably his biggest weakness, but great upside, and that's one of my favorite picks of the draft.
Yeah, so he's an interesting pick, and I think he and Kobie Durant, with some of the difficulties that they had, really is very unique for the Rams because they tend to stay away from those type of scenarios. For this particular draft, they did not. So I think that's really interesting. But I think the young man, did his work, did what he was supposed to do. He did complete the post trial program. And then did get it expunged from his record. Everything else aside, just looking at him as a football player, when you watch him and the way everybody describes it, as long as the game is in front of him, as long as he keeps the game in front of him, he does really, really well, right? And if you look at the Rams scheme, that's exactly what they want. Keep the ball in front of you, make those plays. He's got, he's great with the interceptions. He's got really soft hands. He's great attacking the ball. He attacks the ball like a wide receiver, basically. He had 2 interceptions versus Michigan in the national semifinal game, which I think is great. And what's also unique about a couple of the Ram picks, there's about 3 players in this draft that have kick return experience, right? Williams, I think Durant, as well as Kendrick, and Yeast also, I think, might have it as well. So that's 4. So there's another bonus, right? So a special team entry point for him as well. But what I really liked about him was definitely grabby, but was his aggressiveness. No matter what happened to play before, if he did get beat, he came right back. There was no, there was no like hiding in the shadows. He was right there. Said no fear. This kid also played on 2 national champions. For every year that he was, playing football, he was in the playoffs. Right. So that's 4 years of playoff experience. So this kid is battle tested. And that's what the Rams like. They want to be able to plug and play. If there's any kid that's able to plug and play, this would be it. The Rams also, I think, have enough capital in that locker room with Aaron Donald, right? Bobby Wagner, Tyrann Mathieu, Jalen Ramsey to help to keep this kid's head on right and help him move past whatever it is that happened. He's got a great opportunity. Build a life for himself, right? A career in the NFL, change the trajectory for his entire family for the rest of their lives. So it's a great opportunity. I'm glad the Rams give him this opportunity. And hopefully, from the mentoring aspect, everything in play for the Rams in that locker room, that'll help him to succeed. I think this was a really nice pick.
Do you think his issues affected his draft position? If it had not been for that, do you think
absolutely.
he would have? Yeah.
Absolutely. The one criticism which is valid, because if you watch his tape, it shows up all the time, is that when he was threatened with deep speed and he had to turn and run, he got beat very, very consistently. But I did have a colleague who's also a big fan of Georgia who did talk to me about him. He's a football coach, and he said that was all technique. That's all technique. He has to understand that he can't just at the last second flip his hips and run with these guys. He's got to respect the cushion. So I think that was a valid point as well, because when you watch the tape, he gave up his cushion a lot, very frequently. So I think he's got a great potential. Whenever the ball was in front of him, this kid was on it. I think it's a smart pick. It fits the scheme, and I think hopefully this will end up being a really good feel-good story in a couple of years.
And you're right. I'm not sure who mentioned it, but that Rams locker room, the culture they have there, it should be the perfect place for a guy like this. With you look around that locker room, even look around the defensive backfield. Some of the guys back there, Jordan Fuller, that can help guide him. Nick Scott, who's a team leader as well. I think take him under his wing. That'll be a good thing. 7th round, the edge player out of Daniel Hardy, Montana State, 6'3", 239. Now, I've seen different reports on his weight. I've seen him listed in the 220s, and I've seen him listed at 240. So who knows what his true weight is. But he's certainly productive at Montana State. How do you feel? You want to take the lead on this one, Tom? How do you feel about Daniel Hardy?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that they took an edge. I think they were really looking for, upside here, that somebody that had that athleticism, that they could, that had productivity as well, and that they could mold as a work in progress. He was really able to just really beat up the competition, which was, considerably inferior to many other programs. And as we just talked about with Kendrick, that it's tough to get a real handle on what he can do. However, when these guys from smaller schools do come out, they better be super productive, and this guy is. So, everybody they put up in front of him, he dominated. He has to improve his technique a lot. Probably the coaching staff really just likes his upside here, and they want to work with him. But I think this pick is as indicative as any, and overall, with their lack of edge selections, is indicative of what they intend to do. I think in the free agent market, either pre during camp, pre-camp, in other words, going into the season, or potentially like they have done in the past, target a high-end edge, mid-season on a team that is out of the running. So that's what this pick told me more than anything. We're going to get somebody else. We're going to get another veteran at edge. They're not going into the season with this edge group.
How about you, Paul? Was this guy on your radar?
No, I don't think my radar went that deep. So, it was interesting too, because I think the next three players were non-combine players, and that was something that Les Snead brought up, right? That they went non-combine, I think, in the last round. So, and he spoke about how much work that requires from the scouts to do that. The rationale for that he didn't really get into, but in terms of this young man, good scouting report on him. Great skills, good production. They said room to grow. So, to put on a couple more pounds once he, gets into the NFL weight program, and then a lot of that good NFL eating, right? Gets to eat good food again. But, this pick, although great for depth, goes back to, when we look at the draft and how it played out, there were developmental pass rushers available that we had talked about in our mock. Guys like Dominique Robinson was available. They passed on him. I had mentioned Kingsley Enigberg. They passed on him. Jeffrey Gunter, they passed on him. So it's sort of like I said, this is like a tough draft to read because you can't really figure out what were they trying to accomplish. I think they did accomplish what they set out to do by their own reactions at the press conference. However, I don't have a clue what they were trying to do because it does seem to be unique. This one draft was a very non-Ram draft for me in terms of what the expectations were and how they normally conduct drafts. But great pick. I like his burst off the edge. There's not a lot of tape on him, but what you do find, you do see that. Reminds me a lot of Chris Garrett too, in terms of the developmental aspect of it. But I like what you see on film. The kid plays hard, good motor. So I think it'll be a good developmental pick. Listen, depth at edge is never a bad thing. Bring them on, fill up that room, let them fight it out, let them duke it out.
Yeah, they do need bodies there. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
With not only Von Miller, don't overlook, as both of you have mentioned, losing Okoronkwo. He was a real contributor there too, and both those guys have moved on.
As we'll look at in a little bit here, they brought in three edges, three of the 9-10 guys that they brought in for the UDFAs are edges as well. So they're definitely stacking that room.
Let's see, who do we got? Russ Yeast, the defensive back out of Kansas State, number 253 overall. Good speed and a good tackler. I thought maybe reading about this guy, he's an obvious special teamer. First year with the Rams, I would think. How do you feel about this pick? Paul, you were saying he comes from a football family as well?
Yeah, his dad, Craig Yeast, was, I think, a wide receiver for Kentucky. Actually, I'm pretty sure he was a wide receiver in Kentucky. He left Kentucky. He used to be the all-time leading receiver for Kentucky. He played in the NFL for a couple of years. I think he was drafted by Cincinnati. So when I saw the name, I was like, oh, wow, interesting.
Didn't he set the SEC receiving record?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think he was pretty significant when he played.
Yeah, not just Kentucky. He set an SEC receiving record.
Yeah. So he was a pretty prolific receiver when he was there. So this kid has the DNA to play football. There's no question about it. But what's unique, and I didn't mention this about Kendrick, when I watch Kendrick play, and I think a lot of the Ram DBs are in this mold. He looks like if he was not a cornerback, you could put that kid at safety, no question about it, and he would succeed at safety, right? Keeps the ball in front of him, that type of thing. Russ Yeast started out at corner. I think he played a little bit of safety. He played both. So that versatility is a constant theme when the Rams pick defensive backs, and you see it with this kid as well. He started out corner. I think he got hurt, had an injury, and then missed I think half a season. But good production from what they have listed him. I didn't have a lot on him, so when I had to go back and research it, a lot of really good things. They had him listed as UDFA, right? So if the Rams what did the Rams do? They found a player that they liked. They said, why wait till later? We'll just take him now with our 7th round pick. But once again, the one thing that stood out with him, plays the ball really well. He's able to turn those opportunities into turnovers, INTs. That's the one stat that jumps out when you look at him. And if you look at it there in 2021, 4 INTs, that's the thing the Rams are looking for. They want to be able to turn that ball over when they have that opportunity, get it back to their offense, and that's where they're bringing in. Also, a very good contributor on special teams.
Yeah, this guy was a stud, player of the year in his state, in I believe Indiana. He also played some in Ohio, but kind of that 4-star recruit, again going into Louisville and then transferring. His dad was not only a standout receiver, but he was also a head football coach in college in Kentucky as well. So again, that coaching pedigree, family coaching pedigree. He's also really willing tackler, but he has a tendency to get knocked off of blocks pretty easily. So again, that's probably a technique thing. But he did lead the Big 12 in passes defended last year, and that's a huge deal as well at the safety position. Our safeties have been generally very good in the tackling game and staying in front of people and not allowing those big plays. But there's a clear thrust to improve our pass defense at that position going into this season, and this guy certainly fits the bill.
And one thing that at the presser that McVay, I think it was McVay that brought it up, is that they want their safety / D-backs, right, to be able to jump down on the slot whenever they need to, right, to whoever, whenever anybody jumps out wide. So I think that's important. I think they're looking to sort of extend their defensive capability in that regard and do a better job of defending the slot. The Rams were last defending the pass in terms of a completion percentage, passes within the hash marks. They were dead last in the NFL. So I think that's specifically what they're targeting this time around moving forward. Next
goes back to the drafting players that they have a vision for, as they said repeatedly, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very purposeful in terms of what they're targeting.
And 7th round, number 261, A.J. Arcuri, Michigan State, 6'7", 320. So this guy has the frame of an NFL offensive tackle for sure. And I think he has experience playing left and right tackle. So I see this, you talk about having a vision for a guy, a swing tackle that can back up our 2 starters, basically. That's how I see this. High character, very intelligent, plays with a nasty streak. Tom, you want to take the lead on this? How'd you feel about this draft pick?
Yeah, obviously second to last pick in the draft. Just somebody that they feel like they can, who's smart, who's a willing learner. He's academic, all Big Ten 5 times. Just obviously a smart guy who has that experience, and just somebody they can develop behind Noteboom and Havenstein and even some of the other tackles in that room, AJ Jackson and the like. So it'll be interesting. There's a lot of work to do. Obviously, second to last pick in the draft. He's not a standout. He wasn't a standout recruit for the NFL, but again, somebody that they feel like is super smart and can absorb and learn and contribute on the line and special teams.
Yeah, any academic All-American, I always make room for them on my board. So, yeah, multi-year starter, multi-year academic All-American, got incredibly high grades from all his coaches. Every comment about him is a superlative. They love his physicality. The one, obviously, is footwork, to be able to mirror the pass rushes and the speed of the NFL. That's the big thing. They pencil him in best position as right tackle. But, that was his thing. He was really geared up to be a swing tackle. So big, powerful dude whose hand fighting stands out. That's the descript on him. That pretty much says it all. But once again, a developmental project. And, the Rams coaches do a great job. You know what they do? they turn potential into football players. That's what they do. And that's the bottom line. They want the guys to come in with the work ethic, with the character, and with the resiliency and that focus, and they will do the rest. And that football IQ, I think something in the NFL that gets overlooked all the time. That football IQ aspect of it, sometimes, in my opinion, probably more than not, that's what tips the scales in terms of like a positive outcome, in my opinion. And I think this kid just fits the bill for that type. If you want to have a project, this is the kid that you want to have to be your project.
And I think that another thing that's going to help him, I don't know if you guys noticed in the Rams draft room, Andrew Whitworth was in Vegas on opening night, Thursday night, right? And then on Friday night, he was in the Rams draft room. So I think he's going to be sticking around and helping guys like AJ Arcuri get adjusted to the NFL. Whitworth, I think he already is an incredible coach, I think. Even as a player, he was a coach. I think I told you about the time I went to the training camp in Irvine, and he was out there after practice had broken up, helping various offensive linemen with technique and dropping into their stance and all that stuff. So Andrew Whitworth is going to have, I think, will be playing a role in the development of AJ Arcuri. At least I hope so.
And I think he's already signed up with the Rams. I think he's going to be back this season as a consultant with them.
Oh, is he? Okay, so it's more or less official then. Okay.
And I think like you and I spoke about it at the podcast. I'm a big advocate. I was like, why is like Jackie Slater not a coach for the Rams?
Yeah,
how is that not possible, right?
Right.
Got to bring back some of these guys. And Marshall Faulk, how is he not an RB coach for the Rams?
And here's a list of the undrafted free agents. This may have already changed. These are the guys I knew about. Probably a good time just to ask this question. Is there anybody on this list that you guys think has a shot? And I'll go first. And I haven't done a lot of research on any of these guys, but the one position the Rams ignored that has me a little bit worried is the defensive line, the big boys, and Elijah Garcia, the defensive tackle out of Rice. Just because, I mean, the number of snaps Aaron Donald and Greg Gaines were taking late in the year, and Sebastian Joseph Day is not coming back. They have Ashawn Robinson and Aaron Donald and Greg Gaines and a couple of other guys. So I would think Elijah Garcia would have a shot, just a numbers game for him, right? But I'll leave it at that. Anybody on this list, Tom, that you really like?
Yeah, I mean, I think the kicker is, he was the only really one on any kind of a UDFA list that was out. I will say that I don't think the Rams did nearly as well as many other teams in UDFAs this year. There's the guys, there were some really premium players out there, given how deep this draft was. A lot of people attribute that to the fact that there was a lot of COVID carryovers and whatnot with that extra redshirt year they gave them. But I don't, so I'm not terribly impressed with this list. First of all, I think, but the guys that might have a chance, the two that jump out are Cameron Dicker, the kicker from Texas, and it was I think the rated the number 3 kicker, and the Iowa State linebacker Jake Hummel was also talked about in the draft, and but other than that, it's really more of a focus on what positions did they reinforce and so forth. But those are the guys that I'm looking at.
Now, Dicker can punt as well, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that's like the new trend in the NFL, right? Is finding punters that could also handle the deep kicking duty so that your field goal kicker doesn't have to deal with kickoffs, right? And to really extend, the lifetime efficiency of these kickers, these field goal kickers, which are real weapons now, because it's not uncommon for field goal kickers. We saw it already. You take attempts up to 60 yards. So, and we saw with Matt Gay, the wear and tear of a 17-game season on a kicker, doing, handling kickoffs as well as long field goals is extensive. So we see this new trend on these kickers that can handle punting duties, long field goal, kickoff duties. So I think that's what they're looking at with this young man. He gets high marks for that. Really positive stuff coming out of Texas U on this young man. So that's really good to see. An interesting thing about Georgia State fullback Roger Carter. He was one of the pre-draft interviews and they were specifically targeting him for some reason. So he H-back, tight end type. They have him listed as a fullback. He's about 6'2", 250. Really good physical blocker. I mean, he's limited in that realm. So that could be a very purposeful pick. I could see that also on special teams paying off. So that might be someone to keep an eye on. When I took a look at the Daniel, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, Isom. He was a very interesting. He was a corner. They wanted to find a spot for him, and they had an opening because of injuries. They put him in at strong safety. Interesting kid, you know. He likes to mix it up. They have him listed as limited athletically. I don't know necessarily what that means. The guy's playing football at the NCAA level, but he's an interesting one too. I like his moxie, 5'10", 180. Once again, that versatility, you know, not a cornerback, not a safety, but a defensive back. That type of mindset, I like that. So he might be one to keep an eye on. But I agree in terms of the UDFA list. There were so many players that were out there. Mario Goodrich, Verone McKinley, Josh Joby was out there. Jojo Doman, Kellen Deesh was out there. Dari Rosenthal, who played offensive tackle at Kentucky. I thought for sure when he didn't get drafted, I thought they would snatch him up. I was like, you know, Liam Cohen would be all over that. But the Rams must have their reasons. Smoke Monday wasn't picked. Christopher Allen wasn't picked. We have a coach from TCU, Obina Easy, the offensive tackle. He wasn't picked. And that kid that I had mentioned at our roundtable, Marquise Bell, the player from Florida A&M. Now, we took two players. Yeah, right. We took two players that had a little bit of a background history. He was one of the players that I had mentioned because we have a Florida A&M coach, big safety with talent. He wasn't picked.
Now, keep in mind, you know, a lot of these guys that we didn't sign, they may not have saw the Rams as the best opportunity for them and chose to go elsewhere on their own. And I think if there are free agent cornerbacks out there, DBs, and they see the Rams drafting 4 DBs, they may I don't want to go to the Rams. I have a better shot with the Bears or the Bucks or whoever. So we don't have insight into that. It'd be nice to know how many of those guys the Rams tried to sign, and they said no thanks.
I think what's going to happen also, these NFL camps it's going to be really fun to watch moving forward because you have all these players now that are going to be out there and available. The camp competition is going to be really, really interesting. There's going to be a lot of veterans that are very nervous about all these rookies being out there that are hungry for a spot. So they're going to be some very interesting June cuts.
Yeah, and one note on Roger Carter, I saw him listed. I pulled this from a site that had him listed as a fullback, and then most of the analysis I saw, as you mentioned, addressed him as if he were a tight end.
H-back type, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the Rams' vision for him is, but we'll see.
Yeah. So yeah, just looking at they also stacked up. So I'm not sure. Yes, I saw a little different list. I'm not sure if it was than we have here, but I know it's a fluid process. But 2 safeties and 2 cornerbacks, another 2 safeties and another 2 cornerbacks.
Oh wow!
Added to our team. Along with 3 edges. So it's a pretty common theme where they're looking at, and that defensive, those DBs were clearly the focal point of this draft. And then, one kicker, linebacker, running back, a guard, and a defensive tackle. So, it kind of tells the tale of where they think their need is.
Competition breeds greatness. That's what you want. Fill up those rooms. Best player takes it all.
So we already took a look at this earlier. Let's take another look at it since we've gone through all these players. They've added 5 DBs. That's including the trade for Troy Hill. And the reason I threw up there another trade coming, my special assistant, Matt, and I were discussing, first thing that he said was, is Taylor Rapp getting traded? What the heck's going on? And what does this mean for a potential signing of Honey Badger? Tyrann Mathieu. How do you guys do you think there's more moves coming with regards to a current Ram getting traded or the Honey Badger coming on board? I know you love the Honey Badger, Paul.
Yes, Tyrann Mathieu must come to the Rams. He's going to fit in. So depending on how you want to shape up that wallpaper, you got a fearsome foursome setup regardless, right? You can always interchangeable with Leonard Floyd, but Yeah, I think he would fit in perfectly with what the Rams want to do. I think the Rams are going to keep all. We saw that. Even before the draft, the Rams are going to keep all their options open. Right? They know that they have a real advantage over a lot of other teams. That this is the hot spot to be. The lure of Los Angeles is incredible to begin with, but just the success and the culture, which now everyone is talking about, which is very player friendly, I think is a really attractive to potential free agents as well as players.
Did you
I
see?
know Tom was really big on the corner from the Giants, right? Which I agree would be a great fit. So there are a lot of options out there. I think they're going to do. I think the Matthew deal is going to get done fairly quickly, and then I think they're really going to focus on waiting and bringing in these vets to fill very specific roles once they map out exactly their preliminary depth chart. And I think they're
And
going to go ahead.
did you guys see Jalen Ramsey's tweets
Yeah.
yesterday? I know. So I was confused if he was clearly suggesting a big move was coming, and then the Troy Hill trade happened, and then he tweeted again and specifically called out the Honey Badger coming on board. So not
the
sure
Honey
how
Badger
much.
era, yes.
Right.
But you know what's interesting? Not too many. When the Troy Hill deal happened, it got about 30 seconds of airplay. That's a deal that's getting overlooked. That's going to have season-long ramifications for the Rams.
Right.
The Rams pulled out a really nice deal, and if the money is right, and Tom, you can confirm that. Is that correct that they're only on the hook for something like 1.25?
Yeah, 1.75 or something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
it's a great deal, and then they gave up a fifth rounder. It's not only a fifth rounder, but it's a comp pick. So we guaranteed to be at the end of the fifth round. Not that the Rams fifth round
a comp pick we haven't received yet.
Yeah, it won't be the 32nd pick in the fifth round. It'll be a comp pick. The Rams have 4 comp picks on the books that it looks like they'll be getting 5, and then they had 1 eliminated with the Allen Robinson trade. But anyway, Les Snead had made the comment that it'll be one of those comp picks. But in terms of Honey Badger, I'm a big believer that he's coming as well. It'll be a team friendly deal. It'll be sort of probably something similar to little shy of what Bobby Wagner did. But, in the same sort of a vein, kind of a series of 1-year deals, essentially is what it amounts to. And I just think he wants to play with guys like Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey obviously wants to play with him. And it's Jalen Ramsey was very clearly very, very frustrated with our defensive backfield last year, particularly the safeties. I mean, he smacked Rapp. He was thrilled when Waddle came back, a guy that's retired, and he, became our best safety by a mile in the playoffs. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. And then he tweeted out after the trust pick, the little question marky thing on Twitter, like, really, guys, is this what you're doing? So, it was clearly a thrust of the team to.
One other thing that I'll call out here as far as what they drafted and what they didn't draft. And I already mentioned that the undrafted free agent defensive lineman might have a shot just because of the numbers games. But maybe it's also the first indication that they do like Bobby Brown. And I've mentioned a few times, I don't have any clue how they feel about Bobby Brown. He barely played, which is kind of odd given the rotation that they had at the end of the year, that Bobby Brown wasn't getting on the field. So maybe they do like Bobby Brown, and not drafting a wide receiver. Is that an indication that OBJ might be coming back? But then on the other hand, they gave away his number, right, to Cam Akers. So I don't know. You guys are reading the tea leaves here as much as I am, or am I making much ado out of nothing here?
So I think that go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, the number thing was already in play, and it's not like they can just trade numbers, anytime they want. They have to tell Nike well in advance what the numbers are, and as we've seen, there's some pretty hefty fines or payments that need to be made if to do number swaps after the fact. So that was already in the works, and it would have been interesting to see what number OBJ got last year if Akers hadn't been hurt. And so Akers probably would have retained that number. So I'm not reading too much into that. In terms of not drafting wide receivers, I mean, that room is absolutely full. In addition to Kupp, Atwell, and Robinson, Kupp, Jefferson, and Robinson, there's Atwell, Harris, Gronick. You could count, you got Koski, Akers. There's Brandon Powell, if you count him. That's just not a top need. And I really feel like they feel like Tutu Atwell is their draft pick from this draft that's going to go in to contribute there, because obviously they got hurt at the beginning of the year. So I don't see it. I don't see that as any reflection on the lack of a draft pick of a wide receiver is any reflection on whether OBJ is coming back or not. I think that's
well. Do you have a? You think? I'm sorry. Would you say it's still a mystery to you?
I think it's a mystery to everybody, and they're letting him. I think it's very clear that they're letting him look at the market, and if there's a couple of other guys too. Throw Dante Dion and even Sony Michel into this category, that everybody's been focused on the Rams on this comp pick formula, and how the Rams don't like to sign free agents that had their contracts expired because it cost them a comp pick, like Allen Robinson did. That was their one shot, but they gave up 5. So they were only, so they still have 4, which is the max, right? But they signed Bobby Wagner right away, because one of the reasons was because he didn't cost them a comp pick. And but on the flip side of that is that if their free agents get picked up, then they go into the comp pick formula as well. And while they think they have 4, it's not guaranteed, because of the way the formula works, and there's only 32 doled out. The top 32 are doled out across the league for each round. So anyway, the bottom line is this: starting tomorrow, the comp pick formula is gone. Any free agent can sign anywhere without the team that let him go getting a comp pick. So my point is that they perhaps are also waiting to sign a guy like Dante Dion, or a guy like Sony Michel, or a guy like OBJ until after the opportunity to get a comp pick by allowing somebody else to sign them is gone. So it's and then the flip side of that is they can sign Tyrann Mathieu without giving up a comp pick. So Monday, I think tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of fireworks in the NFL. Let's just put it that way. And this coming week is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the dominoes will start to fall on Monday, and that's what happens. One signing leads to another, and then so on and so on and so on. I think that's what's going to happen as well. I think you're going to see Tyrann Mathieu go, and hopefully soon OBJ. I think he will come back to the Rams, but there are a lot of teams out there that are about 1 or 2 players away from really being in like the top 3 of their conference. So we'll see how it plays out, but I do think he'll eventually come back to the Rams. If there's one position that, and me, I talk about it all the time, that running back scenario, and both Haskins and Robinson went in the 2nd, Haskins went in the 4th. They did not even make it close to the 6th or 7th round. And that's what happened. So I think the Rams, and Tom knows this because I am a Sony Michel fan, is that, it's puzzling at what's happening with Sony Michel, because he does fill, multiple roles for them. And, he's a 2-time Super Bowl winner, once with the Patriots, once with the Rams, runs wonderfully between the tackles. He's an absolute beast. Ball security, never an issue, and a great pass blocker. If there's one issue is, receiver out of the backfield. So it's puzzling to me. Also, the way he just worked and his cut into playing time after, I honestly think he was instrumental saving the Rams season, providing that running game when they had none. So I'm just curious as why they're handling him the way that they are. He's proven that he's a team player. He's okay with not getting his carries. He'll wait for his turn. And, against the 49ers, the NFC championship game, he was the one that picked up that blitzing linebacker when Stafford threw that dime to Kupp to seal the game. So I don't know. I think they need to – I don't think they address that power back scenario that they desperately need. in the draft. So that to me, that's still a glaring hole. But to me, I also interpret it this way. I think they're going to bring back Sony. I really do.
Yeah,
I think he's too good to overlook.
Yeah, I have to admit I've forgotten about him at times. He's just kind of sitting out there.
It's not a matter of, I don't think it's ever been a matter of them wanting him back or not. It's been more of a matter of whether Sony wanted to look for an opportunity elsewhere where he could get, he wasn't going to be the third back in the room on day one. And so by the fact that he wasn't signed anywhere in the offseason may indicate that he doesn't have that demand. But I really do think that people felt like, hey, we can wait till after the comp pick formula comes in. But I do expect Sonny Michel to get signed, to get a good deal elsewhere where he can feel like he can be at least the second back in the room. And that team will not have to give up a comp pick.
Okay, so let's get to our final list of questions here. I think, Paul, you already answered this question. Your favorite pick by the Rams in this 2022 draft?
Oh, Logan Bruss. No question about it. That kid is a mauler. I just love the way he fits that line. Badger pride. So I just think he's a great fit. I think he's a solid pick that is going to be on this roster for multiple years. Great contributor. Fits in well with the locker room. Just absolutely seamless. He's going to fit in with the Rams. Absolutely seamless.
I'm going to go with Durant, and I just think I love his feistiness. I think that's a word to describe him, and I think it definitely fits a need. Adding him to the cornerback room, I think the more I read about him, I think he's going to be a great fit. How about you, Tom? Who's your favorite?
Well, I think I like whoever they were going to pick to fill that guard spot, and Truss fits the bill. He was their first pick, and the only one that wasn't on the last day. So, so he's a solid pick for sure. But in terms of the rest of them, I think I had mentioned it's Kendrick from Georgia. I just think this guy's a superstar. I think he really learned his lesson in the issues that he had at Clemson, and he got straightened out very quickly. And he's a stud athlete that dropped all the way to 212, and at cornerback with all those skills that we love, having the wide receiver background and everything else. And I really feel like that guy's going to be a huge contributor to us for the next 4 years.
As far as the most confusing pick, Paul, you already played your hand on that one as well.
Yeah.
So I'll let you have another run at it.
Well, there were a couple of them that were, like I said, especially the later round picks. But also, I understand there are a lot of positives with that running back selection, but letting running back get to that point in the draft, I don't know. I just thought they were going to walk away with a more power theme oriented running back. So, I'm sure Williams is going to be a great running back, but for once again, focusing on running it back, how does he fit now? I know they're possibly projecting for next year, but running back is one situation you can address directly through the draft. Rookie running backs play all the time. It's not an issue. So I just think that, like I said, just confusing to me why they went that route. And also, I love Kobie Durant, but there were a lot of other corners that were available. I think that one was a little bit curious to me. Love his moxie as well, but I did have some other cornerbacks that I thought, to me, were a little bit more attractive.
Yeah, for me, Kobie Durant is that's the most confusing.
That was my favorite pick, guys.
I know this is where we're going to agree to disagree. Yeah, my most confusing and least favorite pick, especially given where he was taken, and I just not a believer. He's a second pick of the draft, second out of 8.
I guess I should have went last, so I could have flexed to another player.
Well, that's okay. No, that's good. I'm glad we were able to have some different opinions on this. We'll definitely definitely be able to come back and look at this in a couple of years and say, one of us is going to be right, one of us is going to be wrong. But yeah, I just don't feel like he's the athlete that he he appears to be in playing against inferior competition. He's didn't qualify academically for a scholarship. He doesn't have that. If that's any indication of his intelligence in general, in terms of the ability to work in a very complex scheme back there in the zone and being able to read things, I just don't see it. But obviously, I'm hopeful I'm wrong, and I think that one thing that was pretty obvious, just sort of watching this draft coverage and being able to plug into some of the other fan groups that were out there. The Rams have the most trust in their GM at this point, and in their entire staff that's making the selections of any team out there. There's maybe the Ravens are up there. The Jets have a lot of confidence in their new regime, but they always do until they get disappointed. But like the 49ers have not very much trust in their regime. And so it's just interesting to see. So yeah, I do trust these guys. That's the one pick I really question, Kobie Durant.
I guess my most confusing pick, and again, for me, it's just a numbers game, not necessarily a criticism of the player, and that would be Yeast. And that's because at that point, we had already drafted 2 cornerbacks. We had already drafted a safety. And we're talking about bringing the Honey Badger on board possibly, and then we draft another safety. So that part of it confused me. As I was watching the draft unfold and I was talking with my special assistant, and we weren't trying to guess players, right? We're trying to guess positions. And I nailed it pretty well throughout most of the draft, but I did not see another safety coming in the 7th round. So that's all I'm going to say about that. He could end up being a very, very good player.
I don't know if you both agree, and I don't know if it has. I'm sure it has a lot to do with, obviously, with the COVID year, which caused obviously just absolute chaos. But if you look at this draft, it was very hard after probably the 1st round to like gauge. Nothing fell as it was slotted. It was all over the place. I think teams, because of that, really, I think this year more than any, the scouting departments really earned their value this year. And the teams really had to go by, these are the players we want. They didn't have the luxury of like stacking their board based on 3 years of tape and everything else. So I think it was a very different draft. That's why I think the draft was all over the place this year. Guys were taking 20, literally 20, 30 slots over their projected picks, even in the later rounds. So I think that had a lot to do with it. So I think this is going to be, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of talent out there to be brought into camp for these teams. I think it's going to be very advantageous for the teams. And I think, like I said, I think a lot of veterans are going to have a surprise waiting for them. They're going to get cut. So I think June's going to be very interesting, Tom. I think there's going to be a lot of gems sitting out there for the Rams to bring in at a very low price.
Yeah. The positions that I was surprised that they didn't go after more were defensive tackle. So we have 2 free agents next year, Gaines and Robinson, and so a little surprise there. I think that does suggest that there's some confidence in guys like Bobby Brown and Copeland, and Heck got more snaps than most of those guys last year, I think. So they have some confidence there, but a little surprising they didn't bring in a defensive tackle. Again, projecting for next year. The edge was something that we had all thought we were going to see a lot more of. They did bring in 3 undrafted free agents in that position, but and then brought in the Daniel Hardy pick. But again, I thought there was going to be more urgency there, and then the linebacker, inside linebacker, is a position that they're always fortifying in the draft, and the only thing they did there was bring in an undrafted free agent, who I believe is one of the guys that has the best chance of contributing, by the way, Jake Hummel from Iowa State. But having said that, Nobody drafted that position. That was a little bit surprising. So those are the three positions, but they did have to make their choices. They focused this draft on their secondary, and I believe that's going to be covered for the years to come. So we will see next year what they do.
Yeah, if there's a thing that still concerns me post-draft here is, last year we had Whitworth at left tackle, and I just always had I got a lot of comfort knowing that Joseph Noteboom was waiting in the wings if there was an issue with Whitworth, if he got hurt. And I don't have that warm feeling anymore if something happens to Noteboom. We have Arcuri, the draft pick, of course. Hopefully he pans out and he could be a potential backup to Noteboom. I know there's a couple guys on the roster, but nobody that, that left tackle position is so important with this team. So that's one thing that I think concerns me. And like you mentioned, Tom, a little less concerned about defensive tackle. I thought they would draft there. The fact that they haven't tells me that they do feel good about the guys they have, but I thought they were going to draft one defensive lineman, a big boy up front at some point.
I think a lot of these questions are going to be answered in the coming days with how this week plays out with the next phase of free agency and post-draft. It's some of these questions, I believe, will be addressed.
Yeah, by Friday, I think the issue, or at least what direction they're going to go in terms of swing tackle, running back. There's talk also about bringing back Fox if he gets cut loose from.
Yeah, that crossed my mind as well.
Yeah, so when I read that, I was like, I was a big fan of his when he was here, and he produced.
Yeah, Morgan Fox and Troy Hill, two guys that were so productive, and then they go elsewhere for 1 year. And
I have to say, this has been the most fun I've had in the offseason being a Ram fan in a really, really long time. So I'm really excited. Like I said, by Friday, I think there's going to be a lot of clarity. I mean, if anything, the draft was sort of like, okay, we expect a little bit more, but okay. But I think the real excitement is going to be in the next week or two.
I think we have time for my one last question, and that was non-Ram related. Now, we're going to come back in another time, and we'll talk about the NFC West, the draft picks, the moves they've made, the whole league in general. But I did want to each of us give a shot at the one thing from yesterday, from the draft, that really stood out, non-Ram related. And the one thing that stood out for me is I think the New York Jets killed it. I think they are on their way to being relevant again. And I think in a couple of years, that might be one of the tougher divisions in the league. Their first 4 picks were just like, they just nailed it. I mean, they got everything they need. I love their coach. I think they're on their way to being a very good team. I mean, they still have to prove it, obviously. And I'm not sure about their quarterback. A lot of people love him, but that was one thing that stood out for me was the New York Jets having a great 3-day draft.
Yeah, to me, what stood out was the Ravens in particular. I think that they had such a Ravens draft. I'm not sure they picked. I didn't see. I see the final list, but I'm not sure they picked a wide receiver after getting rid of Hollywood Brown. And I don't know what that says about how they're viewing their quarterback situation there and that negotiation that's going on. But anyway, they just picked the best. They picked the best safety, and then they picked the best center, and they just got the best player. Some players fell to them. I'm just very into the systems that successful teams use to perennially be in contention. And while the Jets had an impressive haul, right? How many other times have we said that about teams that are, on the bottom of the barrel? They're all excited.
Yeah.
Oh, I got all these guys. We're going to be great. There's never a 1-year fix in this league unless, there's fixes that put you over the top. But a draft, there has to be a systematic approach to things.
I texted a friend of mine who's a big Jets fan, and I said, "Man, you guys are killing it." And he wrote back, "I'm overseas. What's going on?" And I said, well, you guys just had a really great draft. And he responded, don't worry, it's not going to work, or something to that effect.
Yeah, a lot of great players there, and they're going to be, you know what? A lot of those great players are going to be fantastic players for other teams. If history repeats itself, I'm not rooting against the Jets. I love them. It's one of my favorite fan bases that I would love our team to emulate. They're passionate, very large, and very respectful, and they're very committed and loyal. And as the Rams grow our fan base, one of the smallest in the league at this point. We can look to some other fan bases that we'd like to emulate. So I'm a big fan of that team and that fan base, but their management is consistently been poor, and they might turn it around, but that's yet to be seen. Versus somebody like the Ravens, who is consistent, even after Ozzie Newsome left, kept that same culture, and is again killed it.
Yeah, if you listen to some of the outside voices, the Ram fan base is us three and one other guy. But I always respond, it's like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We have a great team to ourselves, but I know there's more than four of us. But
yeah, I mean, just to continue with, and shout out to Ozzie Newsome, because what he built is still working, right? And that's testament to genius right there. And look at it, and you're right, the Jets crushed it. I mean, look at what they walked away with. But what was interesting is that Ozzie Newsome said something once at an interview, and I read it. He said they were asking about his system and everything else, and he was sharing his insights. And he said the key to the draft is never panic. Trust your board. Trust that your board is going to give you the value when it's all said and done, and you look at your board, you're going to get the value that you wanted with the players you picked. And when I was watching the draft, my son is a Jet fan. I'm always thinking about him. I'm like, oh, please don't ruin the draft. My poor son's going to be heartbroken, right? It was interesting. The Jets were patient, and the players just started to fall to them. And they walked away. Look what they walked away with. Sauce. They walked away with Garrett Wilson. They walked away with Jermaine Johnson at 26 when he was slotted to like at 11 or 12. So, and then brilliant move. What do? They make a deal, and they go get Breece Hall, right? Arguably the best running back in the draft between him and Kenneth Walker. I mean, it just great stuff all around. By the way, the tight end that they drafted, Jeremy Ruckert, shout out to him from Ohio State. He's from Long Island, Lindenhurst, Long Island, so shout out to him. All right, you got a Long Island player out there playing for the Jets. Can't get any better than that. Max Mitchell was a great prospect, and Michael Clemens, who had some red flags, character concerns, but great potential. So they walked away with a haul. They really did. But somewhat related to the Rams, one team I was watching, because I picked them to come out of the AFC and play us in the Super Bowl, was Buffalo. And I was like, please do not let Buffalo walk away with a great running back, because this was a solid running back core. And who'd they walk away with? James Cook. And I was just like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So not a good thing for us in terms of, and that was the one team I was sort of.
And they got the punting god as well, right?
Yeah. So they did fairly well, because they got a great corner. They got the kid from Florida that I like, Khalil Elam. They got him, and they also picked up. I mean, this kid is smooth. He reminds me a lot of Robert Woods. Khalil Shakir. They got him as well. So they did fairly well for themselves. But that James Cook signing, now they got Cook and Singletary, plus the alpha quarterback, Allen. Man, they're going to be tough. But one team that really wrecked it in the draft that did really, really well was Green Bay. They quietly, if you look at their draft, so they got Tom's buddy right off the top. So they led off at 22, Tom. They got Quay Walker.
Yeah, unbelievable that guy went that early. But yeah. we all knew that guy was a freak.
28, they got Devontae Wyatt. Then they got Christian Watson at 34. Then they took one of my favorite players from UCLA. I know you're a UCLA alum, Sean Ryan. Shout out to him.
Yeah,
he was a great lineman. Then they took Romeo Doubs out of Nevada. Then they took probably the most underrated lineman in this entire draft. Probably, in my opinion, the best pass protector in this draft, Zach Toms, right, from Wake Forest. My buddy graduated from there. He always says, call it work for us. You got to work to graduate from there. So Zach Toms. Then they took my favorite outside edge guy, Kingsley Enagbari. They took him. They took Tariq Carpenter, the linebacker from Georgia Tech. And they took one of my underrated linemen, Rasheed Walker, out of Penn State. So they had a haul. They did really, really great as well. And I actually gave them, of all the teams, after the Jets, I gave them the highest grade for the draft.
Yeah, Green Bay always drafts well, right?
Yeah. So they quietly, they crushed it. So very relevant to us, right? So we got that NFC competition right there. Had a great draft. Meanwhile, they had 3 wide receivers that they drafted. So, and then you got Buffalo with that James Cook pick, and then that young corner. So, just to keep an eye out for.
We can come back in a week or two and talk about some of these other teams. Specifically, we need to talk about the Seahawks, Cardinals, and 49ers. I know there's some interesting things going on with them. I had some draft picks that I thought were some good picks, actually, and some curious ones as well. So we'll do that another time if you guys are up for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got to give a last shout out to which we won't be covering in future because we focus on the NFC West, but I got to give a shout out to the Eagles too. I think they really killed it.
Yep.
Yeah. When the trade they got and the whole thing was just, it was a masterful.
Yeah, they could very easily win that division, I think.
Yeah, I think they're going to win that division. I do. And Kobie Durant at 83. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Cam Jurgens. Jordan Davis. This is,
and AJ Brown, right? Put that together.
Yeah, AJ Brown.
Wow.
They got a great tight end, which they needed. It just goes on and on. These guys, I think, are right up there. And then they're also a contending team, right? This isn't a team that they were in the playoffs, and they did, and they went and did this. So I look for Philadelphia to have a great season.
Okay, let's wrap it up then. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time. 2 straight Sundays. I know I really appreciate you taking your time, your own personal time to help out this show. And we will do it again real soon.
All right. Always a pleasure to talk Ramball with you guys. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Super, super exciting draft. And this week's going to be super exciting as well. And
Twitter's going to be busy.
We'll have a lot to talk about for sure. And it will be fun to go through those, the NFC West, especially after this week. And we can not only look at their drafts, but also what happened afterwards. And so, yeah, super excited.
Okay. I'll sync up with you guys later in the week and see when it makes sense to do this again. Thanks a lot for your time and have a great Sunday afternoon.
All right. Badger and Blue. Rams up.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.